If you only know the names of kings, you're already losing half of history. And if you scroll past Queen Tamar, you lose the one story where a woman turns a small mountain kingdom into the strongest power in her world, and then watches the world try to forget her. Do not make the same mistake history did. Stay with her for a minute. High in the Caucasus, where snow sits on the peaks like a second sky, there was once a kingdom that should have been too small to matter. It was called Georgia. Its neighbors were not kind. To the south, Muslim emirates. To the north, restless tribes. To the west, rival princes. To the east, great empires watching the passes and the trade routes. Into this pressure cooker, a girl was born in the 1160s, the daughter of King George III. Her name was Tamar. From the beginning, Tamar's life was tied to survival. Her father's rule was threatened by rebellions. Noble families, hungry for more power, did not like strong kings, but they liked weak ones. So when George named Tamar as his co-ruler while he was still alive, the nobles were furious. A woman as future king. They pushed back. They whispered that she was too soft, too pious, too inexperienced. In their minds, a woman on the throne meant one thing: an opportunity, a throne that they could lean on, a crown they could bend. They were wrong about her, but they did not know that yet. When her father died, Tamar did not inherit a peaceful crown. She walked into a hall filled with men waiting for her to fail. They made demands. They forced her to accept their conditions. They insisted she marry quickly so a man could guide the kingdom. The message was clear. She could sit on the throne, but they intended to hold the legs of it. Tamar agreed to marry. It was a move that looked like surrender. She chose, or was pressured to accept, a foreign prince, Uri of Ossetia. Uri was handsome, a skilled warrior, and very aware of his new position. He wanted more than the queen. He wanted the crown. But here is where a normal medieval story flips. Tamar did not fade behind her husband. She watched. She listened. She waited. Uri drank. He humiliated people at court. He insulted her allies. He grew too close to the nobles who had tried to control her. And when his arrogance finally overreached, Tamar did something almost no queen of her time could do. She divorced him in front of the church. In front of the nobles. She ended the marriage of a king and queen on her terms. Uri was sent away in disgrace. The nobles were stunned. The game they thought they were playing had just changed. The quiet girl they planned to use had just removed their piece from the board. If you stop listening to her story here, you miss the exact moment she stopped being a ceremonial figure and became dangerous. With her husband gone, Tamar moved fast. She filled the court and the army with people who were loyal to her, not to the old factions. One of them was a man who would become both her partner in war and her second husband, David Soslin, a seasoned commander who respected her authority instead of trying to steal it. Under Tamar and David, Georgia did not just survive, it expanded. Armies marched south and east. Cities that once looked at Georgia with contempt now sent tribute. trade routes that had passed through foreign hands were redirected under Georgian control. Victories piled up. Muslim chroniclers wrote of Georgian armies appearing like storms, hitting hard and disappearing back into the mountains. Battles like Shamkar and Bassiani were not flukes, they were lessons. The lesson was simple. This small kingdom on the ridges of the Caucasus was suddenly a problem for everyone around it. And at the center of it all, Tamar sat on the throne, not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as sovereign. Her people did not call her queen in the small sense. They called her Mepe Tamar, King Tamar, not because she pretended to be a man, but because she ruled with the full undiluted authority that word carried. But Tamar did not build her power on war alone. Inside her kingdom, she created something that is much easier to lose than territory, a golden age. She strengthened justice, curbed the worst abuses of the nobles, and protected the church while keeping it under royal authority. She supported writers and scholars. At her court, Shota Rustaveli wrote The Knight in the Panther's Skin, an epic poem that would become Georgia's national treasure, dedicated to her monasteries. Were not just spiritual centers, they became schools, scriptoria, places where ideas moved as easily as ink. Trade brought in wealth. That wealth funded stone, churches, fortresses, cliff-carved monasteries. These were not just religious sites. They were Tamar's way of carving her reign into the landscape, making it difficult for future rulers to pretend she had not existed. For a while, it worked. The Caucasus was not just defended, it was shining. If you reduce her to a queen who won some battles, you lose that part of her story, that she made her people feel like they were living in a special time. Of course, not everyone loved her. Rivals plotted. There were uprisings. There were cousins who thought the crown should have passed to them. There were foreign rulers who refused to believe that Georgia's surge in power could last. They were half right. Tamar could hold the center while she lived. No one took her throne. No one dethroned her. She died in power around 1213, after roughly 3 decades of rule. But rulers are mortal. Pressure is not. After her death, the kingdom she strengthened began to fracture. Her heirs were not her. Generals grew too strong, neighboring powers recovered, and then, less than a lifetime later, something even worse arrived: the Mongols. Step by step, Georgia's empire was dismantled. The borders shrank. Some of the cities Tamar had brought into her orbit slipped away. The memory of her age turned from present reality to a nostalgic story. And this is where that feeling of loss comes back hard. Because when later centuries looked back, they had a choice. Remember the woman who built the Golden Age, or remember only the kings who lost it? You already know which option the chroniclers preferred. Today, most people can list a few medieval kings from Western Europe. Richard the Lion, Philip Augustus, maybe a Frederick or two. Very few can tell you about Tamar, the woman whose armies were winning battles while those kings were still arguing over crusades. If you are not careful, you end up thinking that real power in the past only ever wore a beard and spoke Latin or French. That is the quiet damage of forgetting queens like her. You lose the proof that leadership was never as narrow as the famous names suggest. Tamar's contemporaries called her King of Kings, Queen of Queens, Champion of the Messiah. They painted her not as an exception, but as the rightful center of their world. When you skip her, you are not just losing an interesting character. You are losing an entire model of what power could look like. So here is the thing. You can let this be the only time you hear her name. You can let the algorithm bury her again under a pile of kings and conquerors. Or you can decide that you are done losing queens to the margins of history. If Tamar the Lioness of the Caucasus made you stop and rethink who ruled the past, do not let that feeling vanish with the next scroll. Stay, subscribe, and step into the rest of the stories that were almost taken from you, because she was not the only one. She is just one of the first we are finally taking back.